Good evening and happy weekend, everybody. Saturday, fun day. Just an update. Been a pretty busy week, so I haven't been able to keep my video schedule this week. Monday, I had my mock audition and free class audit with the McKinnon Acting Studio here in Laurel. I picked, as my mock audition, I picked this scene from Supernatural. It was Sam and Dean in the first episode after Dean does his, dad's gone on a hunting trip and he hasn't come back in a few days. And then Sam notices what Dean's after and takes him outside, and then they have their argument and talking about, like, I love that part. And he's like, he's like, why? What do you got a problem with Dad for? And Sam's like, when I told him I was scared of the thing in my closet, he gave me a 45. Well, what else is he supposed to do? Like, that's normal. I love that reaction. He's supposed to tell me not to be afraid of the dark. Like, you know full well, like, the dark has serious things in it. You know what I mean? I love that scene. But it was interesting. I tried it out, and I wasn't rehearsed enough with the lines, so I was kind of doing it more like you say your line, and then you're reading while they're doing theirs. So my eye movement was like all over the, looking at the script, looking at the video, because we all did virtual. So I don't think it went too well, but it was a free audition practice, and it did, based on that, they judged and told you what level of the classes you should take. So no issue. Then Tuesday, I got my new phone. I decided instead of trying to get a camera separately and use my phone upgrade, I'll just get a really good phone. And so this is my first video using the Samsung S22 Ultra. This thing is pretty dope. Camera, like, photos are really clean. They do some touch up automatically, which is kind of cool. And then you have like a new tool where you can omit objects. So like I took a sample photo of the Smithsonian Castle, and I cropped out the last couple people that were walking by and 4 cars parked in front of it. It looks like just a building photo in like a mid-morning. It looks so cool. I'll be practicing more on doing that with the photos, but I'm really excited for the video cameras. This thing's got like 5 cameras staring at me right now. It's crazy. Let's see. So that was Tuesday. The problem is I didn't get to make my video for Monday on Tuesday with the phone. Oh, no. It was actually Wednesday. I didn't make either video on Wednesday when I got the phone on Wednesday, because it did come in Tuesday. It came in Wednesday. I had sat there in the store for 2.5 hours after getting out of work to transfer the data, but we were using the Wi-Fi, and my Samsung S9 just doesn't like their Wi-Fi, I guess, because it was stuck doing like percentage or like decimal points of percentage, you know what I mean? And the minute we leave, because the store is closing, like I was there from when I got off work till the Samsung store closing trying to get this damn thing to transfer so I can turn my old one in, because it's part of the promotion. And the guy's like, just take it home, bring it back tomorrow. So the minute we leave Wi-Fi and get onto just data, it downloads by the time I get to my house. I was like, that's I should have done it in the store, but whatever. Learning experience, I guess. So that was Wednesday. Thursday was my first time trying to use the phone, because I didn't get to do much at all, because throughout the week I work out in the morning and then work. So I'm literally like, I'm gone for like 12 hours of time. So it's kind of trying to juggle that was interesting. Main thing was getting a phone. And then the delays of getting it and transferring it, kind of lost a couple days there. And then found out Friday that a friend of mine from Montana was in town. She had a conference and she was in town for that. And I was like, pretty excited. So today we did just a good old walkabout of DC, just looking at the sights and everything and hanging out, catching up. So for today's video and scene renditions, or not necessarily renditions, but reenactments I'm going to do is going to be kind of like DC themed. So I'm kind of thinking a couple scenes from like The Patriot. I love their little opening argument for the vote of the levy. And I'm going to do probably Live Free, Die Hard. There's a couple of fun lines in there, and the whole thing takes place in the DC area, which is pretty cool. And then, well, it's actually, it kind of moves all over the place, but it's most of the problem originates and stays around the DC area. And some West Wing, I think. So there's a couple great scenes from West Wing, and of course, it's in the White House. So to start off, Colonel Hurwell of the Colonial Army is addressing South Carolina's voters, I guess the state owners, or the legislation, all put together from local estate owners and such. And he addresses the court, and he's just like, my name is, Colonel Hurwell of the Colonial Army, and I am sure you are all aware of my cause. It needs not being said here. In a few days, we're expecting a Declaration of Independence to be drafted out of Philadelphia. 8 colonies have already levied money for forming a colonial army. I ask that South Carolina be the 9th. And then this other gentleman speaks up. He's just like, Virginia and Massachusetts may be at war, but South Carolina is not. And a bunch of people, here. And then this other gentleman is just like, oh, no, not even one gentleman. The colonel keeps going. He's just like, this isn't a war of 1 or 2 colonies, but of a freedom and independence of all colonies of this nation. And then the one gentleman stands up, and he's just like, yes. And what country is that? Or what nation is that, he says. And this other gentleman interrupts, jumps up. He's just like, and an American nation. He's like, there is no such nation. And to speak of one is treason. He's like, we are an American nation. And our rights are being trampled from a king that's 3,000 miles away. And then Benjamin Martin, the main protagonist of the film, he jumps up. He's like, why, Mr. Howard, would I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? An elected legislator can trample a man's rights just as fast as a king can. And Mr. Howard kind of gets embarrassed a little bit. So the colonel is like, Benjamin Martin, I understood you to be a patriot. Do you mean if I'm by a patriot, if I'm angry about taxation without representation? Well, indeed I am. If I believe the colonies can govern themselves, I believe they can, and they should. But if you ask me if I'm willing to go to war with England, then the answer is most certainly no. And this other gentleman jumps up and he's just like, this from the famous Benjamin Martin, whose fury is so infamous from the Wilderness Campaign? I was intemperate in my youth. Temperance is a clever disguise for fear. Mr. Middleton, I served with Benjamin under Washington in the French and India Wars. And I and no other man here would more readily risk our lives and trust them to Benjamin Martin. A bunch of people, here. He's like, what would you suggest, Ben? He's like, well, we take our case before the king. We plead with him. Yes, we've tried that. Will you do it again and again and again to try to avoid going to a war? He's like, Benjamin, I was at Bunker Hill. 3 times the Redcoats advanced on our line, and 3 times we killed over 500 of them in point-blank range, and they still took the ground. That's the measure of their resolve. Now, if your principles dictate independence, then war is the only way. It has come to that. I have 6 children. My wife is dead. And who should look after them if I go to war? Wars are not just fought by childless men. Granted. But mark my words. This war will not be fought on some distant battlefield or the frontier, but it will be fought amongst us, amongst our homes. Our children will learn from it firsthand with their own eyes, and the innocent will die amongst the rest of us. I will not fight, and thus I will not cast a vote to have others fight in my stead. And what of your principles? I'm a father. I don't have the luxury of principles. And of course, the levy passes and they go to war and stuff. And the colonel comes out, and Benjamin's oldest son, Gabriel, joins the regular, or their colonial army and everything. And the colonel walks up to Ben and he's just like, I'll take good care of him, Ben. I'll give him a field page or a stable, boy position. And he turns and just slightly looks at Colonel Harwell. He's like, good luck. And that was pretty interesting. Like, there's a lot of good scenes. Like, I really like also later when Benjamin Martin, now in charge of a colonial militia in a field rank of colonel, he's visiting, or he's parlaying with Lord Cornwallis, in charge of the entire British force on the colonies in the Revolutionary War. And they, of course, etiquette protocol kind of thing, because he's former British military. He knows all about that. He's like, before we begin this negotiation, or let's begin this negotiations, and he's like, unless you want to claim a grievous status. And Cromwell's like, yes, Colonel, I would like to claim a grievous status. It has come to my attention that certain convoys have been ambushed, and a lot of my personal effects have been looted. Personal memoirs, letters from home, some of my literature. I would ask if it could be returned to me. And Ben's like, of course, yeah, granted. He's like, thank you. Now, before we begin speaking of prisoner transfer, Ben interrupts. He's like, I'm sorry? You have 18 of my men. I want them back. Cornwallis plays dumb for a second. His general leans in and starts talking to him. He's just like, I'm aware of 18 criminals under the sentence of death, but we don't have no militia here. If that's your stance, then 18 of your officers are going to die. 19 if you hang me with my men. My officers? Yes. Their name... Oh, he takes the telescope. He's like, follow me. Leads him and shows him. He's like, look to the tree line above the second ravine. And he's like, the names and ranks? They didn't give me their names, but there is 5 lieutenants, 4 majors, and he starts riddling off some stuff. 2 majors, and 1 colonel that calls me a cheeky fellow. This is not the conduct that becomes a gentleman. If the measure of the gentleman is the conduct of your officers, I take that as a compliment. I forgot a part though. There's a good part when they do a back and forth and he counters him just before they talk about the prisoner exchange. He brings up, he's like, we must address you targeting officers on the in engagements. Now, we both can agree that leaderless armies would be chaotic and savage, and we can't have ourselves conducting a war in such a manner. And he's like, say, targeting women and children. That's a separate issue. No, I consider them linked. And in every time your officers target women and children, civilians, my men will target officers on the battlefield. And let me tell you something, Lord, my lord, they're excellent marksmen. But I like that movie. It's really good. And it gives you like kind of like American Pride kind of feeling. And then if you go the opposite route, you go into more of a modern era and terrorism, not full-on nation combat. You get into Live Free or Die Hard. And that movie, let's just say, is great. Like, Matthew Farrell is the big computer programmer that John McClane's bringing into town, into DC for the feds because of big cyber attacks happening. It's called what's called a fire sale, which is apparently that they just literally systematically attack every point of the infrastructure to try to, as Matthew Farrell said, he's just like, I always thought about doing this and just thought it'd be so fun just to hit the reset button. And then McClane's just like, kid, it's not a game. It's a country. You got a lot of people that are home, thirsty, starving, scared out of their minds. Risking their lives here. Now, come on, kid, help me think of this. Help me stop this guy. And he continues on. He's like, he starts talking about like what he would do. He's like, how do we beat this guy? He's like, well, a lot of it's automatic, but certain things are not linked to the system. They're located to only there's certain geographical locations, like major utilities. So he's looking for one of the hubs, and he starts typing in stuff. He's like, oh man, my cell phone's not working. And John McClane's like, what, are they knocking satellites on this guy now? He's like, no, my battery's dead. Like, it just shows that disconnect. So like, he's like the tech guru, and anything tech related and the problems of the plot, he's the guy that's got to answer, because John's like, what? But then he gets attacked by this Asian chick, Matthew does, when he's trying to slow them down at the power plant. And then John starts fighting her, and she punts him through not the elevator, she launches him off, outside, and he goes flying off onto like a balcony and then rolls off and stuff. So he gets in a company rig, goes driving through the building, and as she's about to pull the trigger on Matthew, as he's finishing up cleaning up what he did, he comes plowing through the cubicles with the glass walls and stuff, and she turns just in time to catch the hood of the truck, the SUV, and he's like, hi, I'm back, right? And he's all driving and stuff, and he freaking goes flying all the way through the building with her and crashes through the elevator door and into the wall. And I'm surprised she didn't actually get pinned in between the wall and the car, but she just BAM! And then they start going down, but of course the vehicle's getting trapped in the mechanisms to the elevator, because the elevator's not, it's all the way up at or all the way down, but the cable and stuff is grabbing the car's bumper and stuff. And she starts trying to crawl up the machine, or up through the vehicle and stuff, and they start getting in like close quarter combat and stuff, and she breaks free for a second, and then John McClane gets tired of it. He grabs her by the leg, yanks her down, throws her into one of the back seats, even though it's like kind of sideways now. And then as she's coming up, getting ready, he's like, smile pretty. Just gives her a straight shot, knocks her ass out. And then he gets a hold of the cable, and she starts grabbing her gun as she's coming to and starts shooting at him, but he ducks behind the chair. But in between of all the motion they're doing, the bumper finally gives. The vehicle goes falling to the bottom of the shaft with her, and he's holding on to the cable. And she like does the look and then looks back just in time. She's like, oh shit, and then bam, the big Hollywood explosion and everything. And you got McClane just hanging there. He's like, he's just like, look what I did, right? I beat you. But then the bad guy calls because the hack's still happening. His counter hack is still happening. And he's like, Maya, I thought I told you to lock this down. And it's Timothy Oliphant, which was, I thought was really cool, seeing him as a bad guy. Because Hitman, he's like an anti-hero. But anyway, so that's her name. And you see him look at the webcam all stunned, like, what the frick? He's like, so you're the asshole in charge of all this. He's like, who are you? He's like, don't worry about that. He's like, but I'm the guy taking out all your henchmen. And you've got to be running out of henchmen. He's just like, was there a number or something? Like 1-800-henchmen? He's like, oh, and I bet you're still on hold for, can I get another dead hooker chick here? What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? And Timothy's character, Thomas Gabriel, is getting really emotional. He's just like, you have no idea who I am or what I'm capable of. After I'm finished with what I'm doing here, which will be soon, I will dedicate all my resources to you. You want to make this personal? Fine. And he grabs the webcam to turn it off. And then you see Timothy's character on the other side get up and fling his shit off the desk. And then he goes walking over to his nerds that are setting everything up. He's just like, reroute every cubic inch of natural gas to that power unit, or that hub. And the guy's all like, what? And he's like, move! And he starts clicking on shit, and it starts sending a bunch of gas to the thing, and Matthew's monitoring things. He's like, this is not good. And McClane's like, what? What's wrong? He's like, all the gas is coming back. He's like, what do you mean all the gas? Like, watching the monitor. All of it? So they go running away before it explodes. It was a pretty interesting movie because it was kind of like old and new, almost like the Men in Black vibe with Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith's characters, you know, the old busted and the new hotness kind of vibe. So the guy that is big on technology, nowadays, current events and everything, is dealing with a dinosaur of the old era, a relic kind of thing. So it's kind of cool to see that mix. That's kind of the main basis of that show, I think. Especially the part when McClane does his, like almost every movie, and Live Free or one of the diehards, there's always a rant. And I love when he's tells Matt to stay down, and when they're in the tunnel after a bunch of cars after him, he gets in the freaking cop car and he's just like, it's like, you send me in a tunnel? Throw cars at me? He's like, oh sure, we need a senior detective, not one of the jerkheads from the academy. Go just grab this kid, bring him to DC, take him to the feds. So as he's doing this, he's in the car, he's backing in, he's going back the way he came. A helicopter's leveling down so the guy can shoot at him. It starts hitting the hood, and there's like oil and fire coming out of the hood and stuff. And he's like, car's on fire. That can't be good. And he goes driving over like this median, launches the car as he's jumping out, and the car goes flying into the helicopter. And the guy that was shooting bails out just in time, but he lands on a car hood and stuff and hurts his neck and back a little bit as the freaking helicopter explodes and hits the ground. And McClane does his little right as he's like kind of collecting himself because of his roll out of the car, and Matthew comes running over. He's like, McClane, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. He's like, you took out a helicopter with a car. It's like, thousands of people die from cars every year. Why should they be any different? I love them. I love those movies. They're fun. Just those little bits of comedic relief in a big action movie. And then you got, I would classify the scene in West Wing I'm thinking of as like complete presence. Like, it was a pilot episode and it really introduced Martin Sheen as Jed Bartlett in just such a powerful way. So the background of his character is he went to a Catholic university because his father was the dean there, and he was raised as a traditional Catholic with a Latin, understanding and background, and he could speak it. Basically, like he was being tutored to be like possibly a cardinal and move on up, right? But that wasn't what he wanted to do. He wanted to make change that helps the little person, because at the time, very misogynistic and a bunch of other issues, and the women weren't being paid much at the university, and he meets Miss Lanham, and of course she recognizes the potential and recognizes that he likes to help the little person. So she's like, "We're the little person. Do what you think and help us out." And he stands up to him, gets attacked by his dad and stuff. So that's the history of his character. So this scene in particular, Josh Lineman, he was the deputy chief of staff for his administration, and he had this big outburst on a interview with this lady, Miss Marsh or whatever, a big like Catholic or Christian talk show, but politically motivated as well. And she was saying something like, "Well, you don't pray to a God that I do, Mr. Lineman." And it triggered Lineman, and he's just like, "Yeah, well, your God's too busy avoiding indictments for tax evasion." And that's what caused a big stir up. So the whole episode was basically building up to get them into the White House and do a formal apology and stuff. And you got the deputy chief of staff, Lyman's in there to make the apology. Tobias, what's his last name? I can't remember his last name. Anyway, Richard Schiff's character, he's playing Toby. He's he's in charge of he's a communications officer, so he writes like the speeches and stuff. And then you had their press secretary, C.J. Craig, in there. Toby Ziegler. Ha! Gotcha. Anyway, and then the three major reverends of different political party lobbies or PACs or whatever, they were in there. And they're talking, and so they sit down, and she's like, "Okay, so why are we here?" And Toby starts to say, "Well, we're here." And Josh is like, "I got this, Toby. We invited you here. That I wanted to say is what I said was that bad taste, and I was going for the cheap joke, and I apologize to you, Mary, and to your following and viewership. I was just going for a cheap laugh, and I'm sorry." She's like, "Okay, what do we get?" And Toby's like, "What do you mean? You get an apology?" She's like, "I get that, but we're here. What do we get out of it?" Nothing." And then she starts saying something about, she's like, "Oh, you people and your New York sense of humor." And Josh is trying to diffuse it because he notices Toby's starting to get triggered, and he's just like, "Well, actually, I'm from Connecticut." And then Toby interrupts the conversation. He's just like, "She meant Jew." And he's looking right at her, and she turns and looks at him, and she's starting to get a little fiery. "Didn't you? New York sense of humor?" And then the conversation begins to divert a little bit, and she's like, "I don't think I like what I've been not convicted of. What's the damn word I'm thinking of? Accused of." And then as he's speaking something else, Toby's like, "Well, that's tough, Miss Marsh." And Toby, like, everyone's like freaking out, like, "Oh my God." And then he's like, "Toby, it's fine." He's just like, No, if we're going to sit through this preposterous exercise, then we're going to get the names of the damn commandments right. She's like, "Oh, here we go." He's like, "Honor thy neighbor is the third commandment." And the other reverend's like, "What's the first commandment?" And out of nowhere, they hear this like out-of-body voice, but they hear this commanding voice come in. He's like, "I am your Lord thy God. Thou shalt take no lord over me." And it's Martin Sheen walking in. He's got this cane and everything, and everyone's all standing up and looking at him. Those were the times, weren't they? "What do you got here, CJ?" "Oh, a bunch of hot tempers, sir." "All right, well, why don't we all take a seat?" "Nah, they're not going to be here that long." He's like, "Al, I asked you several times to denounce the practices of the Lambs of God, and you've denied me several times." "Well, that's not up to me." "Crap, Al, it is up to you." He's like, "My wife, Abby, always told me to don't do anything when I'm angry because I'll mess it up. Just like years ago, had a really bad day at the State House. He starts walking around. He's like, "Can I get some coffee, Mr. Roberts?" I was at the State House and I had a really bad day, so I went home and I just wanted to go for a drive. So I get in the car and she's like, "Don't do it, sweetheart. You're angry." I didn't listen then, and I put the car in reverse and I forgot to open the garage door. My wife Abby was right then. She was right today when she told me not to get on that damn bicycle. But I guess I was probably as mad as I've ever been in my life. It seems my granddaughter Annie decided that she wanted to exercise her First Amendment rights by speaking on a woman's right to choose. Now Annie, all of 412, is very young, but very precocious for her age. And somewhere in a teen magazine between what boys you should like and what makeup you should look into doing, she spoke about a woman's right to choose. Now Annie, all of 12, was just speaking what she thought was right. Now, I get a call from my daughter, Sarah, Elizabeth, and she calls me crying, and I'm like, "Elizabeth, what's wrong?" And she's like, "It's not me, it's Anne." Apparently, she received a message from the Lamb of God. Now, I've always been a good man, and I've always taken care of my family, and I did the right thing, and I've read my Bible from cover to cover. So I want you three here now to tell me, where did the Lamb of Gods grasp their divine inspiration when they sent my 12-year-old granddaughter a Raggedy Ann doll with a knife stuck through its throat? You will denounce these people, Al. You'll do it publicly. And until you do, you can all get your fat asses out of my White House. CJ, see these people to the door. And Miss Marsh is gathering her stuff, and she's like, "I think we can find our way out. Find it now." I mean, that presence of just Martin Sheen saying that is incredible. I think the only other more powerful scene, two other more scenes, power scenes, if you will, or presence. When he, as a Democratic president in shows and in reality, they always assume that they're going to be very weak dealing with the military and conflict and stuff like that. So, of course, in any of these politically intrigue and dramatic movie or TV shows or movies, there's always some sort of like a conflict testing point to see their resolve. And in this particular case, there was a huge genocide going on, and Josh Lyman convinced the president that it's against like almost everybody's belief and religion and everything, morals, that what they're doing is wrong, and if you have the power to stop them, you should. And he finally kind of bit into that. And he ordered, his Joint Chiefs and everything to draft plans for invading the country that in question. And then, of course, getting word of this and possible military involvement from the United States, the ambassador of Kandahar, their made-up country name they picked, comes in with his aide, and the president just got done saying some stuff to his Joint Chiefs, and he was informed that the ambassador was waiting for him in the Oval Office. So he comes walking in, and his chief of security, or chief of staff, Leo McGarry, is right behind him. And he comes walking in, and he's like, "Sorry, gentlemen, I've been held up. I just came out of a major ops plan meeting, kind of thing." And of course, the ambassador starts speaking. He's like, "Mr. President, I've been informed that you are trampling on the sovereign soil of my country." He's like, and then as he's saying that, he's reaching in for shaking. The president shakes his hand while he's saying, "I only took your airport." And, stuns him. He's just like, "I needed it to land my battle tanks, my helicopters, the 130th Attack Wing, the 82nd Airborne, I need it as my staging ground. He's like, then he starts talking. He's just like, President Mziki has been addressed by the Red Cross to enter in to give aid to the citizens. And he's like, that aid's like, Kandahar is in the midst of a civil war. No, it's not. It's in the midst of a one-side slaughter of an entire people. And he's just like, men, women, and God knows children. And the guy's like, children that can one day be raised to be soldiers against the president and his regime. He's like, the Red Cross has been asked to enter your country to give aid. And the Holy Father himself has asked you. And you have struck him down 3 times. President Mziki has 34 hours to lay down his arms to the men and women of the 82nd Airborne, or at 34 hours and 1 minute, I give the word, and the 82nd Airborne and the 130th Attack Wing takes your capital and runs up our flag. It's just like, it was kind of like really impressive, and I butchered the shit out of it, but I haven't watched in a long time, so that was from memory. Which I think is a really powerful scene. And I'd say the last, but definitely not the least, is Lineman got shot in the episode before, and Miss Lanham got killed in a DUI when she just bought a brand new car, her first brand new car ever, and then she was even doing the test drive, and she got hit and killed. And he just kind of had a loss of faith in that. So he goes to the cathedral for her funeral, and then as everyone's leaving, he takes a moment and he walks back in the church. He has the Secret Service secure the building and closes the church, and he's just standing there alone. And he speaks his grievances to the Lord. He lights a cigarette. No, he doesn't light it yet, but he starts talking to him. He's just like, you're a son of a bitch. He's just like, Miss Lanham has been working dutifully in service, as a wonderful woman. And she finally bought her brand new car, and you hit her with a drunk driver? What was that? He's like, I move my fleet out of harm's way and instead get hit by a hurricane and a couple ships capsized and all hands lost. He's like, he even killed a tinder ship. Do you even know what a tinder ship does? It just fixes stuff around other ships in the fleet and services the mail. It doesn't even have guns. And what about my son, Josh Lineman? He nearly died. You almost killed him. You almost took my son from me. But at the same time, you want us all to revere and respect yours? And he starts speaking Latin. Of course, I can't do the Latin, but he's like, you wretch, you reckless thug. And he starts doing a lot more Latin and stuff. And he stands in the middle of the cross on the floor. He ignites a cigarette, takes a massive puff, drops it, and then squishes it into the floor. Like a big sign of disrespect, obviously. And then he points to the Jesus on the cross in the front of the cathedral, and he's like, you get Hoynes. Meaning he's basically going to drop out of the race, but he doesn't. He comes back. Kind of near that episode, he was dealing with kind of a religious fanatic who takes the Bible really literally and how they should do it. And he was talking about this episode, and in this episode he was talking about how he doesn't know how he beat his opponent for the governorship of New Hampshire, but he did. He's trying to reconcile that this whole time. So he's dealing with his own re-election campaign, and it's not going as well, but he's still stuck in the way his mind works. He's still stuck in trying to solve the problem of how he beat his opponent in New Hampshire. and he's paying attention because he's actually running a current campaign himself. He's, seeing he's going to win, so he's trying to figure out how he beat him. And so this whole episode's about him discovering that. And at the end of the scene, he's addressing a bunch of people that do talk radio and stuff, and about the radio waves and how important it's to keep the radio going, even though they're getting a more video digital age. And he's sitting there talking, and he sees this one lady sitting down. Everyone's standing except this one lady sitting down. He recognizes that lady. He's just like, he's all talking. He's like, it's important once in a while. And he gets interrupted. He's like, I'm sorry. You're Dr. Elizabeth Martin. She's like, that's right. And you have that radio talk show, right? The therapy thing. She's like, that's right. He's like, that's good. It's important to every once in a while to get our message out on the airwaves. And I'm sorry, Dr. Martin, are you a PhD, or not a PhD, are you an MD? She's like, no, sir. He's like, okay, do you have any sort of training in psychology? No, sir. Theology? No, sir. Healthcare? No, sir. I'm just wondering, because when they call into your show, you offer them advice, and you call yourself by doctor, and I'm just wondering if they might be confused, if you have any experience in psychology, theology, or healthcare. She's like, sir, I do not believe they are confused. He's like, I like your show. I like how they call it, or how you call homosexuality an abomination. She's like, I don't call it an abomination, Mr. President. The Bible does. Yes, it does. Leviticus chapter 12, verse 22 or something like that. And he's just like, right you are. But while I have you here, may I ask you a few questions? He's just like, my daughter, Abby, she's fluent in 3 different languages. She always sets the table in its term, and she's a graduating George Mason University grad. What would a good price for her be? While I have you here, let me ask you another. My brother John sells crops of sells a field of 2 different crops side by side. He's just like, should he be put to death? And he's like, my chief of staff, Leo McGarry. He insists on working on the Sabbath. Now, am I obligated to kill myself, or should I call the police? He's like, this is another really important one. And she starts noticing her mistake. He's like, this is an important one because we live in a big football town here. Touching the skin of a dead pig makes one unclean. Does that mean that Notre Dame can't play any more football? Or West Point? Do we really have to stone my grandmother because she wears cloth of 2 different, wears cloth of 2 different fabric or whatever? Do we have to burn my uncle in a small gathering for something or other? I don't remember what he said. He's like, why don't you think on those for me? And let me tell you another thing. Now, while you may be mistaking this as your monthly membership of the Tight Ass Club, in this building, when the president stands, nobody sits. And she kind of like stands up, holding her shit, like, oh my god, like he schooled her. But I'm kind of rambling on now, and try to get out there this video and explain what my week was going on for you guys, keep you updated. But I also wanted to touch base on some reenactment from memory of different movies and stuff with a theme, because I was in DC today. So I hope you enjoyed yourself. If you cashed in, and I hope this video quality is a lot better. I'm going to continue to use this phone more and more, and eventually hopefully get a stand and probably a green screen. But until then, I'm going to sign off, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and until I see you